So coming out of the bye week and going into Sunday's Week 10 game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, the San Francisco 49ers making a major change on the defensive side of the football. That's what we're talking about on today's 49ers Report, as Steve Wilks will be calling plays from the sideline instead of the booth. Does this matter? We'll talk about that here coming up. Obviously, the first question that arises, does this matter? Will it make a difference? Right? Because Steve Wilks has been in this league for a really long time. He was hired for a reason. He has chops as one of the top defensive coordinators in the NFL. He's been able to show that. But this year, Niners are really struggling, which is why they're making this move. But are they making it out of a panic gesture? We're going to unpack that and dissect that. First, though, special announcement right here on the San Francisco 49ers Report. I want to thank all of you for supporting the show. Since I took over in April of 2021, we have officially surpassed 100,000 subscribers. So now YouTube is going to send us a very special silver plaque. There are very few NFL channels out there that have been able to say that they've surpassed this milestone. We've done it because of all of you, but all of the hard work from myself, but all of the other people behind the scenes at Chat Sports, some of the faces that you never see, some of the faces that you do see, like Trizzy Trace, producer Chip, Jack Lauderay back in the day. So thank you so much. We did it, and the job ain't finished. We're going to continue to grow because this is the standard for Niners Talk right here on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed, do so right now. This is now the official, largest independently run Niners channel that covers this team on a daily basis. All right, let's get back on track. Views from the sideline. Shout out to Drake. Views from the six. The real ones know. Steve Wilks. He is the first defensive coordinator under head coach Kyle Shanahan since he was tabbed head coach in 2017 to coach under Shanahan, to call plays as a coordinator from the booth and not the sideline. And this Niners defense during their 3-game losing streak has struggled mightily. And the idea here of moving Wilks from the booth to the sideline, this will improve in-game communication, especially when it comes to adjustments and defensive strategy throughout the course of a football game. And there have been a lot of issues with this defensive unit during this 3-game skid, but even when the Niners got off to that 5-0 start, there were issues that we talked about on the show that were bubbling beneath the surface. Let's start with the issues that are pertaining to this pass defense. Last 2 losses against Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings and against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, Cousins and Burrow combined to go 63 of 77 for 661 yards. That's not sustainable, and it's simply not good enough. And a team that was the number 1 ranked defense in football last year shouldn't be getting cooked and gashed like the Niners have been. That's the issues with the pass defense. The issues with the run defense have also been problematic. This has allowed drives to continue. San Francisco has not been able to get off the field. And when they've fallen behind in some of these games, they've struggled to come back because the clock is not on their side, because other teams continue to run it right at them and eat clock. In 2 years under defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans, San Francisco in 2021 and in 2022 were the number 1 and 2 ranked run defense in the NFL. This year, though, San Francisco has dropped dramatically, all the way to 26th among 32 teams in the league. Simply put, this defense is way too talented with all-pros, Pro Bowlers, and future Hall of Famers, and way too expensive, especially on that defensive line where you're investing more than $92 million to just Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, and Eric Armstead to be playing this poorly. And when San Francisco has title aspirations, they're starting to hit the panic button a little bit, sitting at 5-3 going into the bye week, where they started off at 5-0. They dropped 3 straight. They need to make some adjustments, and that's why they're doing what they're doing right now with Wilks. Is it going to matter? I point to a guy like All-Pro linebacker Fred Warner, and we want to share his opinion because I think his opinion should be valued. He thinks that Wilks on the sideline can make a little bit of a difference as far as making an adjustment for this defensive unit. Here's a direct quote from Fred Warner once he found out about the news. I think more so than anything, the move is a result of him just wanting to be down there as our leader of the group, making adjustments on the fly, looking us in the eye when we're down there. I'm sure it's little things like that. Fred Warner also said, I do believe that this can help some of the communication in-game when we're trying to make adjustments. And it's important to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that the players are not without blame. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw have missed more than 30 tackles as a linebacking duo this year. That's not good enough. Nick Bosa shouldn't only have 3 sacks this year. That's not good enough. So the players are not without blame. Some of the 49ers stars have simply disappointed. But there's also an issue with players being put out of position by a defensive coordinator who doesn't understand this scheme all that well and doesn't have familiarity with the personnel on this roster, because he's putting players out of position and he's, in turn, having those players stray away from their strengths and what makes them a very good player. And I want to go back to the quote that we discussed last week from Richard Sherman, whose defensive mind I certainly trust. He said, if I were to make changes with this Niners defense, this is what I'm doing. We're going back to the fundamentals. We're going back to the things that we do well. We're not running man on first and second down like they have been doing. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think they're sound. We're going to mix it up. Our defensive line is going to have to get hot like they have been doing the last few years. For you to take them out of that, for you to sit there and run gains and stunts and do all these other things instead of just ears back, get after the quarterback like these guys have specialized in the last 3-4 years, it's weird. It's weird, and I think Kyle Shanahan has had enough. I think this is the straw that broke the camel's back. I think there will be changes next week. Richard Sherman predicted it, and he predicted it correctly. And this is one of the changes that the San Francisco 49ers are making here. As for ways that the Niners can improve what has been a porous defense, I have 5 of them here. The pass rush has to get home. You're paying a lot of money to your defensive front. And up to this point, they are tied for 18th in the NFL with only 18 sacks. And Nick Bosa, after winning Defensive Player of the Year last year, has been held in check. The pressure numbers and the quarterback hits, they're great. He has to be able to finish. I want to see less of the twists and the stunts and the gains. Just allow these guys to pin their ears back, as Richard Sherman said, and get after the quarterback without having to think so much. Because if you think about it, if Nick Bosa has to come around on a stunt, that millisecond that it takes him to go on that twist might be the difference between him actually sacking a quarterback and just having a pressure, and that quarterback getting that ball out of the way, out of his hand, I should say, and completing a pass downfield. I think that San Francisco should change up the coverage a little bit. Less man on first and second down. Bench Isaiah Oliver, please, because over his last 4 games, he's allowed a completion percentage of 100%, second worst rated cornerback in football this year. And going back to a previous note that I had, Steve Wilks has had these players playing out of position and away from their strengths. For instance, Talanoa Hufanga has been playing a lot of free safety. And because of that, he's not able to play in the box, which is what makes him a Troy Polamalu-like game changer. So will the Niners defense turn it around against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday? We'll be doing a watch party for that game, so make sure you subscribe. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. That is today's poll question. It's a Y for yes for me as far as using the Prize Picks app when it comes to daily fantasy sports. And if you're looking to win 25 times your money, like producer Trizzy Trace and I have done this NFL season, sign up with Prize Picks today. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. You pick 2+ players. You choose more or less on their projected stat lines. And the best part about this is a $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use the code CLNS. The picks that I like going into Sunday, Trevor Lawrence, more than 248.5 passing yards. I just like his talent, and I think that Jacksonville could be coming back late in this game, and he could rack up some of those passing yards. Dak Prescott was really good against the Philadelphia Eagles last week, more than 243.5 passing yards against a bad Giants team. And then Christian McCaffrey. Bye week's going to help him heal up a little bit, more than 71.5 rushing yards. So one more time, it's Prize Picks $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use the code CLNS. We'll put that information down below in the comments section as well as in the description of this video. We appreciate Prize Picks for supporting the show here. So you think about this matchup against Jacksonville, and this obviously ties in with the conversation that we're having about Steve Wilks here today and what coverages we might see from the Niners in this game. The matchup against Trevor Lawrence, certainly one to watch going into Week 10. Specifically, the coverages for the Niners. Trevor Lawrence has been excellent against zone coverage this year. He is first in QBR at 77, second in completion percentage at 76%, and fourth in expected points added on passes at 28.49. Against man, though, those numbers drop to 24th in QBR at 49.5, 22nd in completion percentage, and 21st in EPA on passes. So I know that Richard Sherman talked about playing man on first and second down. That is obviously matchup based, and that is dependent on which quarterback you're going up against every single week. When you look at the trends and you look at the numbers, like we just did with Trevor Lawrence, that's when you alter and change some of your defensive play calls, and it's up to Steve Wilks to do that. Now, up to this point, statistically, it hasn't all been that bad for San Francisco. They are still number 4 in points per game allowed on the defensive side of the ball. They're still 10th in yards per game at 315, 11th in yards per play, but their third down defense and red zone defense has been putrid, especially with the players on this team. And a part of that is that when these teams are in third and medium, third and long, San Francisco has this inability to sack the quarterback. And because of that, teams are converting 40.5% of their third downs. That's 21st in the NFL defensively. And then in the red zone, they're converting red zone trips once they get inside the 20 at a 61% clip. That's number 23 in the NFL. As for what Kyle Shanahan, said about Steve Wilks and this change defensively for the Niners, he said, I kind of want to have him be down there and be near our players a little bit. They've had that more with just the linebacker communication in the past, and I want him to be down there so that he can talk to guys a little bit more. Of course, with that, a lot of you have this question. Well, Chase, why has Steve Wilks been in the booth? I've seen him on the sideline before, whether he was a head coach or a defensive coordinator. He said that being up in the booth takes the emotion out of the game, where he doesn't make emotional decisions. But I think having that pulse of the football game is really, really important. And look, my sister is a psychotherapist, and she talks to me about mental health a lot. And as part of mental health, she goes into the intricacies of interpersonal communication. And when you think about face-to-face communication, I do think that there can be a massive difference here because there's a human element to it. Instead of communicating with your defensive players, in the case of Steve Wilks, through a headset like this one, you can make eye contact with a Fred Warner or a Nick Bosa. You also can hear an inflection point or a tone, which is important in trying to get a message across. Body language of somebody is really important. You can tell if somebody's angry. You can tell if somebody is stern. You can tell if somebody is disappointed. You can tell if somebody needs a change to be made throughout the course of a football game. Keep in mind, I'm talking about the interpersonal communication and my sister's experiences with people because there are studies that prove that these things are really important. It's the overall messaging of that face-to-face communication, which I do believe is really, really valuable. For instance, I thought some of the COVID rules a couple of years ago were absolutely ridiculous. I was working for a news station up in Pennsylvania, and to be away from the news studio and to not have any communication with my bosses, it was weird. I'm sitting around, I'm waiting to get my workday started, and I'm like, are we going to start this Zoom call? Am I going to get a message instead of just going into somebody's office and saying, hey, what's the plan for today? I can do it. Okay. You want me to change something? I can do that as well. Tim Kawakami of The Athletic also made some good points about this change for San Francisco and said, I think the problems have centered mostly around a feel for the Niners' defensive rhythm and personnel, which I should concede here is probably exactly what Shanahan and Wilks mean to address with the move to the sideline. Clearly, Wilks has X's and O's acumen. He has the authority. He's the first outsider, though, brought in as a Niners coordinator since the beginning of this era, and has admitted he's still adjusting to the defensive scheme and personnel. But Wilks is not a neophyte defensive coordinator in any way. And I think those points are certainly valuable. You have an outsider coming in here. Kyle Shanahan did not promote from within like he did previously with the DeMeco Ryans. And he didn't have a relationship with some of the players. And with that comes an understanding of what they do well and what they don't do well. But with Kawakami, he makes those fair points because even the eye test kind of tells you that during this 3-game losing streak, the Niners have lacked instincts, which is rare. The play calls have felt a little bit monotonous and mechanical, where the offense is able to understand what's coming, and that's not good, of course. Things aren't flowing as well as they should be with the pass rush being synchronized with the back end, and San Francisco seems to be playing hesitant. And when you're a football team playing hesitant, that might keep you from hitting a gap to make a tackle or making a tackle in the backfield or going with the wide receiver on one route or passing a wide receiver off to that third level if you're a cornerback looking for the safety to take over. Like, all of those things are really important to this conversation. I will say this. I know we've talked a lot about on the show how these things could matter and how these changes could benefit San Francisco. All of this will not matter at all if the 49ers lose and get torched by the Jags. And if that happens, Steve Wilks, the heat beneath your seat going to turn up a little bit. If you want to contact me, interact with me, love to hear from the faithful. I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Chase_Senior. I'm on Instagram, at Chase_Senior as well. Or a lot of people have shot me some emails of late. It's been really easy to communicate with you because my fat-ass fingers always make spelling mistakes on my iPhone. Chase@chatsports.com if you want to shoot me an email. And don't forget to subscribe. 100K Sub Club. What up?